maybe let's start with to quickly introduce myself. For those who don't know me, my name is Loreta Liutkute, and I'm a head of public policy and at Western Union. So with working together with my old colleague Tyler, and I'm a vice chair also of EPIF. So I started rightly saying in his keynote speech, our EPIF conference title today says that we are discussing payments 2.0. And the Commissioner McGuinness yesterday also stated that actually top of 10 unicorn companies, 4 of them are fintech companies. So it's quite a good indicator on how this industry is driven by innovation. Commissioner also said quite interesting things yesterday, that the Commission put forward a comprehensive package to improve the AML framework, as well as undertake an ambitious works on creation of the EU digital identity. This is very relevant for financial services, especially because it's going to facilitate the onboarding process and increase efficiencies in payment. Indeed, innovation is great, but even better when it's happening with in a secure manner and for consumers and the society in general. The summer they published the EU AML package was quite impatiently expected by the industry for a while. The harmonization of the anti-money laundering and counter-terrorist financing rules across the EU would definitely be an important piece towards the EU single market achievement. Even the words anti-money laundering and counter-terrorist financing are already indicating the difficulty of the file. It is obviously a controversial topic. You agree with me. For a while, they used to have a confrontational approach of the ecosystem of participants. And maybe it's a good opportunity today now to move from a kind of more blaming logic, probably towards a more cooperative approach, where the public authorities, legislators will work together, and where the private sector will cooperate with public authorities to achieve this comprehensive AML CFT framework. And eventually technology, and was mentioned by Tyler, and innovation such as eID would play an important role in this game. So today, in the light of the AML package and then the Commission proposal in general on the regulation on the European digital identity, this session will discuss some aspects to ensure how to ensure the efficient AML CFT systems. So I would like to make this session as much as interactive as possible. So please do not hesitate to submit your questions in the chat, and we will make it that to not just speeches, but also some interactive discussions. I'm really excited and proud to moderate this panel today with the respectful experts on the AML CFT related issues. And so without any delay, please let me to introduce the speakers of today's panel. So Raluca Pruna, Head of Financial Crime Unit at DG FISMA and the European Commission, as well as Ilse Zlotina, Head of Financial Intelligence Units, Latvia. My colleague Tyler Han, Chief Compliance Officer at Western Union. Amir Hanif, Regional Head of Financial Crime for MEA and UK MLRO for Stripe. And Noel Bartolo, Head of Compliance MRLO at Finance Incorporated Limited and Vice Chair of EPIF AML Task Force. So maybe without this, I will turn to Raluca, and I will ask her to make this very exciting presentation of the EU AML package.
Thank you very much indeed, and allow me to start by saying that I'm very honored to have been invited in this EPIF conference, in this panel discussion with the distinguished co-panelists. About the AML package, I would like to say from the outset that we do hope that it was not a surprise. I'm addressing an audience of experts, and they do know why this ambitious legislative package was tabled. So allow me to be very short and to say that we have started from some conclusions in the 2019 AML package, that non-legislative package that the Commission published. And already there it was the case that while we have acknowledged the difficulties in enforcing the current AML rules, or the rules as they currently stand, it was very clear that there were structural problems that needed to be addressed. On the basis of that findings, in May last year, the Commission issued an ambitious action plan setting all the measures to be considered with a view to achieve at union level a comprehensive policy when it comes to AML CFT. So this is why we have the Commission has tabled this legislative package. And allow me in the introduction to also say that it is perhaps the political momentum is perhaps unprecedented, because both the co-legislators in the Union, the member states in the Council and the Parliament, but also stakeholders were all aligned to ask action from the Commission. So this is what the Commission delivered with the legislative package adopted in July this year. The package is responding to 3 of the 6 pillars in the action plan. So first of all, it responds to the request for a single rule book in the field of AML CFT. Second, it addresses supervisory issues that we have seen that were AML supervisory issues that we have seen were a problem. And last but not least, the package also offers a mechanism for the cooperation and support for financial intelligence units in the Union. So we have in the package, without entering into too many details, we have 4 legislative proposals. 2 of them, the first AML regulation and a new directive accounting for the single rule book. We have a regulation creating the AML authority, which responds to the need, to the institutional reform in this field. And we are also aligning through a recast of the transfer of funds regulation. We are aligning our legislation in the Union with the latest work in the FATF. On the single rule book, we have delivered what stakeholders and co-legislators required, and based on our own conclusions, we are delivering on a call to put an end, to the extent to which this is possible, to the current fragmentation in the Union. Because as you know, the legislation as it currently stands is based on minimum harmonization on a series of directives, which proved to be challenging for some member states to transpose, and then some of them gold-plated when going beyond, and the result is a fragmented landscape. And having a first regulation in this field replies to this request. As MEP Heina Luoma, who is the rapporteur in the Parliament in the Econ Committee for the AML regulation, already said, we have enlarged the scope of the scope of the regulation and the list of obliged entities. We have clarified the rules of customer due diligence in this single rule book. We have clarified as well we have worked towards a more granular approach when it comes to beneficial ownership provisions. Just to give you in a snapshot what the regulation is about. And because we are in the field of AML, which is underpinned by risk, it needs to be said that the fact that we are putting on the table one single rule book will not at all mean that having the risk in mind that member states cannot go beyond, but in very strict conditions and very justified. So this is about the regulation, which broadly speaking comprises obligations for the private sector, for the obliged entities. The directive, the draft directive encompasses obligations for member states, for competent authorities. The institutional reform with AMLA provides, in this architecture set up a forum for better supervision in the field of AML. We have foreseen a structure of AMLA in which we have two arms of AMLA, one for supervisory activity tasks of AMLA and one for the FIUs. Very briefly, within the scope of AMLA, I've heard what MEP Heina Luoma and also what Tyler said in the introductory remarks. We have foreseen for AMLA in terms of supervision to have a direct supervision over the financial sector, but to exert it over a limited universe of entities to be selected according to a number of criteria, objective criteria, which are described in the regulation. Then we have foreseen also, unlike the current framework, to also account for supervision of the non-financial sector in a milder way, of course, by providing a public oversight of the so-called DNFBPs, of the non-financial services and professions. When it comes to the FIUs, the arm on FIUs that will be part of AMLA is aimed at providing a forum for, as I said, more cooperation and support. I used to say when presenting the package that while we have heard the calls for a new FIU, we had to be, of course, proportional in our approach. There is a requirement that all member states have autonomous and independent FIUs, and we see no merit nor justification in terms of proportionality to replace the national FIUs with the one EU FIU. And then there would have been some legal problems in relation to that, but I don't think that for the purpose of this conference, this is very relevant. However, when it comes to FIUs, the ambition is to facilitate their work, especially in cross-border cases, because at the end of the day, we all know that complex money laundering cases, they always account for a cross-border element, and the Pandora leaks just prove that. As quote again, MEP Heina Luoma, the Union is not an island. We cannot protect ourselves in our small environment without taking account of the cross-border element. And what we aimed with the provision on FIU, with the legal text on FIU, is to allow more cooperation and to allow for easier and joint analysis by FIUs. And then, trivial as it may seem, it is the case that with more common tools, with the common toolbox for FIUs, cooperation could be further strengthened. So I would stop here. And I'm happy to reply to questions and engage in a vivid exchange on this package. And allow me, before closing, to say that in the Commission we're looking forward to very smooth negotiations that reply to a call for action, for urgent action, to better equip the Union to fight money laundering and terrorist financing. Thank you.
Thank you, Raluca. Actually, those last words seem to be very encouraging, and indeed it brings to that idea of working together instead of working in silos, isolating, because the criminals, obviously, they know that, and they use that to their advantage in the current situation of the AML framework. So it's very encouraging, and thank you for providing this very comprehensive summary of this very ambitious project with a number of different legislative acts to be reviewed. So I think that's kind of the heart of the core of our discussion today. Maybe on this, also from speaking from the member states perspective, let me ask Ilse Zlotna regarding what are, in your views, where do you see any inefficiencies when it comes to the AML framework, or or also in opportunities. Ilse.
Yeah. Good afternoon. Thank you for inviting me to this very important event. I'm truly happy about availability and ability to speak here. So from the first thing what I want to express here is having Raluca Bruna here in this conference. I would like to say really congratulations to the European Commission for this very important task to be accomplished, and we as the representatives of FIU, we are very happy that several very important items have been put into the AML package, and by this raising attention to so many issues that are there in a field of AML that needs to be resolved or solved. From the perspective of FIU Latvia and myself, I think that's not a big secret that I represent the country which some years ago experienced some important reforms due to the, I would say, unfortunately, scandals that where the Latvian banks were involved. So in 2018, we experienced the BLV bank scandal, and afterwards we also received money involved, which is FATF regional style body assessment, which was saying that basically AML system in Latvia is not effective. Starting from this, and I was involved in a public sector from in a capacity like I'm right now. I was just in 2018. Before that, I was a representative of private sector for 20 years, and therefore I really share all those kind of like concerns that private sector is having in relation to how to put AML system to be more effective. So in 2018, we started to deal with the crisis that we have here in Latvia, and I think we didn't waste this crisis. And this is something that I would like to also to bring to the table here in this conference, and not only here, that although it's very natural for human beings to be involved in some kind of self-blame and say always that we are in a crisis as region, Europe as having a very important problems with AML sector, I would say it's not true. I think that AML in Europe, we are better positioned from the technical point of view, definitely. From effectiveness point of view, it differs from country to country. And of course, we are as strong as our weakest link here. And therefore, it is very important that the European Commission has very clearly stated that we need to reform the regional effectiveness of all countries, not only of one region or one part of the region or one country. And therefore, this AML package, of course, I think will bring us to the new level of really of effectiveness. But what is right now the most important thing, and if I may again jump back to the AML package, I think that there are very important steps that has been included in the package. And if we talk about the AMLA, which of course will very, very directly influence and impact the work of FIUs, then I think that there are very important items included, but some of them are not so much developed. And I would like to bring our attention to the fact that there is a lot of effort or a lot of emphasis put on the supervision, which is of course very important. But this is something that has been dealt already for very many years by other organizations or by other institutions. And I would say I see incredible improvement in supervision, different type of supervisions. And therefore, my part, which concerns FIU to FIU work, of course, for me personally, is more important. And I see that AMLA somehow did not respond to all those hopes that we had there. And I hope that we will be able really to create something that we, during our reform process in Latvia, we've been able to really to create. Basically, it can be described by just one word: trust. trust between public to public, public to private, and really very strong cooperation. And this is the only answer to the any question which relates to the AML and fight with money laundering. And if I may say what are my concerns still, even reading this very, very comprehensive offer by European Commission, is that we are again talking a lot about supervision, talking a lot about different types of cooperation, but we are not using this opportunity to really speak about what is the most important thing in combating money laundering and financial crime, the end result, prosecutions and confiscations. And if we read AMLA and other documents in a package, then we know that there is just one very small article, if I may say, or section, which talks about cooperation with Europol, which talks about the what we will do in case of non-cooperative countries, how we will respond to the fact that international money laundering is always about the cooperation with one country to other country. And here I see that we still need some more improvements and more efforts to be put into the fact that Europe is suffering from criminals that are abusing our system, that we are getting financial flows, international financial flows from the countries that at the end of the day will not respond to our requests of mutual legal assistance, will not respond also sometimes to requests of FIUs. And this is something where I still think that whatever we will put on paper, the end result is the most important if we can trust each other, if we can cooperate with each other, and if we can have a central point which will respond to those countries that are abusing Europe as a region. But at the end of the day, I would say the biggest concern about new package and AMLA is that I think that we are too cautious about putting enough resource. I'm talking about the budget and the potential staffing. I don't really think by having that experience that we had in Latvia, by creating really strong public-private partnerships, strong public-public partnerships, by creating the structure of International Financial Intelligence Task Force, which calls together 25 countries to analyze just one bank's activities, ABLV, I don't think that 45 million and 250 employees will be enough to really fulfill all those hopes that we are putting in relation to the new institution. So, but I think that by such discussions which we are having right now, we will most probably get to the result that will be the most effective for all of us. So from my side, that's it at this stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Ilse. I think it's very interesting statements that you made, and I think it brings a bit of salt to our discussions. It's perfect. I like it, and maybe I will ask if Raluca, you have anything also to comment when it comes to the Ilse's statement when it comes to the ambitions of the European policymakers on the AML framework.
Yes, thank you. If you allow me, without taking too much of the time, I cannot agree more that at the end of the day, because we regulate for our European citizens, and at the end of the day, they would like to know that there is an end result. There is, as Ilse said, there is a prosecution of cases and final convictions, and ideally confiscation of deeds obtained through committing a crime. But here, if I may, with this package, we are bound by a legal framework, which is not something new. I mean, this is the legal framework that the internal market legal framework, which was used for the series of directives that were tabled so far. And this internal market legal framework is only accounting for the prevention of money laundering and terrorist financing. And this, I'm competent to speak about this package, but I would like to draw attention to the audience that there are other instruments of EU law, and I will just quote the directive of 2019-1153 on the use of financial information, where there are clear provisions on the exchange of information between FIUs and law enforcement authorities, FIUs to FIUs in different member states. So all this should be put in a wider context, in a bigger puzzle, whose ambition is indeed to provide end results. Indeed, in AMLA, in the regulation establishing AMLA, there are provisions on the cooperation of the AML authority, again, as an authority which is working on the prevention. It's not an authority which will have competence to prosecute, because we have the European Public Prosecutor, and whenever the EPPO is not competent, we have national prosecutors who are competent. But we have provided the language for the cooperation of AMLA with all interlocutors, including the Europol. And here again, I would like to reassure everyone that it is no intention to leave Europol aside. We work very closely with Europol, especially when it comes to PPPs, where Europol is very active. And indeed, while I'm not directly competent to speak about cooperation of law enforcement authorities with Europol, you know that at EU level this is happening. So I would stop here and pass on the floor back to you, Loreta.
Thank you, Raluca. Yeah, thanks for a very comprehensive response. And maybe on continuing on that discussion, when it comes to the challenges and opportunities, turning now to Tyler, and I would like to ask you from the industry perspective, how do you see also what will be in your views? Do you see any challenges, opportunities, or any inefficiencies when it comes to the AML framework?
Well, yes, certainly. I don't know that we'll ever be in a world where there are not both challenges and opportunities from an efficiency perspective. I think maybe just to build on what Ilse said as well, I think nothing gives us, even in the private sector, more satisfaction than seeing the actual end objectives achieved. You know, we're really we believe that the integrity of the whole system depends on ultimately holding criminal parties to account. And that's not something we can do. That's only something we can play a role in. And it's ultimately up to national authorities and to prosecutors to do that. And that requires this, this interconnectedness, FIU to FIU, but also financial institutions playing their part. And I think that's where, talking about a risk-based approach for financial institutions, we know what we know about our business and about our customers. It's only one piece of the puzzle, but where you again have overly prescriptive requirements, whether it's on CDD and ECDD, that requires collection of data points that sort of really go beyond painting a picture that is going to be of help to prosecutors and others. It ends up just creating friction and noise and expense, without that corresponding, ultimately contributing to the end result. And I think that's going to continue to be the challenge. I think where the opportunity is, and I'm speaking broadly, but I know we've got other panelists who I'd love to hear from on this. I think technology, and when you think about things like AI and machine learning and other things that enable us in the private sector to evaluate massive amounts of data over time that include, customer data, transaction data. They help us build typologies and really understand what's happening in the network. I think that's where flexibility and the ability to continue to explore and innovate and use that technology in good faith, then ultimately, to play our role and provide that information to FIUs. I think that's got tremendous opportunity. When we really look at where we got, and Raluca, I do want to add my congratulations to the Commission on what I think is a tremendous amount of progress that has been made. I can only imagine, as a former regulator myself, the amount of work it takes to get to where we've gotten. But you know, the world continues to evolve around us, and we know that, you know, as soon as we take one step, there's 3 more steps that we need to take. And I think allowing, you know, risk-based approach and use of technology that helps move these ultimate metrics, that helps us actually identify illicit activity and address that. I think that's, you know, that's going to continue to be a challenge for us. We know that, you know, only a small percentage ultimately of illicit activity is detected, reported, and ultimately prosecuted. And I think we want to, you know, continue to focus on how do we move the needle on that, and get a, you know, a better ultimate outcome at the end of the day. I think technology will help us do that, but I don't think more prescriptive requirements that force a misallocation of resources within the private sector. I just think that's a risk. You know, if there's requirements that we don't think help us identify that illicit activity and work with FIUs to ultimately prosecute it, I think that's, you know, that's the direction we don't want to go. But again, I know, Loreta, there are other panelists here, I think, who are also, you know, quite familiar with these challenges. I'd be interested in their perspective.
Thanks, Stella. Thank you. Yeah, indeed, it's a good summary of the difficulties that sometimes industry is facing when it comes to using the risk-based approach, and also complying with the quite sometimes strict regulatory framework that puts a bit in the quite tight brackets the industry, and it's also not always helping to move with innovation. Maybe on this, and as Tyler rightly said, I will ask Amir, what is the Stripe's perspective also when it comes to the risk and opportunities, and you would like to speak probably about the digital onboarding and examples from your part of from your business.
Yeah, thank you, Loreta, for inviting me to the session. And let me just start with thanking the European Commission for the package that they have put together. I mean, it is a very impressive package. And while there are always opportunities for improvement, this is a significant forward leap in where we are today. So, Liutkute, thank you so much. And I hope to meet you one day and thank you in person for all the work you have done. The 2 things that I wanted to highlight are some of the things that Tyler and Ilse talked about, which is that when we look at the opportunities for improvement, especially when it comes to taking a risk-based approach, starting with the risk assessments, I think that's the one thing that we haven't talked about yet, is something that we could focus on, which is how do we go about identifying the risks that financial institutions and then the overall financial services sector faces from good and bad actors. And I include both in that because good actors can be taken advantage of by bad actors. And if we are too prescriptive in our regulations, then what ends up happening is that the bad actors find a way to get around the regulations and the good actors get to be blamed and have to suffer, which is what we saw in the past decades with the massive amount of de-risking that happened following you know, a number of financial crime related developments. How we can go about, and by we, I mean the financial services industry can go about working with regulators, is through the use of technology. So what do I mean by that? For example, if we do a risk assessment on certain products, geographies, customer types, and understand what a EU-wide supranational risk assessment that Liutkute referenced in her remarks earlier raises as the risks to be highlighted, what we can do is we can talk to regulators about how we are mitigating those risks through the use of technology. So AI, for example, is one such aspect. These days, as we saw recently in the recent pandemic, onboarding has become digital. No one goes to banks anymore because they couldn't go to banks. So if you are going to do digital onboarding, then the risk assessment becomes really important because the evidence that is used to onboard and verify a person's identity cannot just be someone sitting in front of you doing face-to-face verification and then treating that face-to-face verification as inherently less risky than digital onboarding. because of the development of technology such as checks on IP addresses, geolocation checks, AI checks on whether documents have been faked, even though you are not looking at the documents in front of you, we are able to, in a more secure manner than you would if a person was sitting in front of you, able to verify an individual's identity. That mitigates the onboarding risk from which all other risks are derived, because once a person or an entity is able to get into the financial services sector, then they are able to do good or bad things. And if you're able to mitigate that at that point in time, then the FIU's work gets easier, the CDD works gets easier, and obviously the regulators' work gets easier. So overall, it's just a gateway into the financial services sector that we can mitigate through development of technology. Now at Stripe, as you know, we, along with some of our other partners, we've worked on a number of things such as digital verification, onboarding through selfie checks, etc. And those things have gone in a long way to mitigating financial crime risk. And my one request would be that regulators do not treat onboarding, digital onboarding, as more risky than face-to-face onboarding. There may be very legitimate reasons for thinking that, but the technology developments over the past few years have been so significant that they are actually at par or even lower than face-to-face onboarding, the risks, I mean. And so my request would be that we could communicate to the regulators and show them how this mode of onboarding is less risky and therefore helps our users create less friction, enhance the number of users in the legitimate financial services sector. Now, the Commission has alluded to that in a number of their statements where they've talked about digital onboarding, they've talked about simplified due diligence, certain things that they have highlighted in terms of thresholds we've mentioned earlier that may be too prescriptive, because they again go back to the risk assessments that are done and put too many conditions on their risk assessments. So my bottom line is there have been a number of technological developments that make physical onboarding, I'll make a controversial statement here, physical onboarding more risky than digital onboarding, because digital onboarding continues to evaluate a user's behavior on an ongoing basis, whereas physical onboarding stops at the onboarding. And so if you are able to evaluate behavior on an ongoing basis and make that part of your risk assessment and then the risk rating you give to a user, that decreases friction while at the same time helps us mitigate risk and support the FIUs. I have another comment to make about partner-to-partner information sharing between the private sector, but I'd hold off on that until others have gone. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Amir. Yeah, that's it's very interesting and indeed controversial statement. It's something for the Commission probably also to take the considerations and indeed there's the proposals towards that direction to create this European digital identity. Maybe on this also continuing with the private sector, and afterwards we'll come back maybe to Raluca to have some statements when it comes also to some of the things that you said. Noel, from your perspective also, you would like to maybe share some examples on electronic onboarding and your views then indeed how it's perceived as a high risk instead of face-to-face, and how the use of technology can make the process more secure and more efficient.
Correct. First and foremost, thank you EPIF and thank you European Commission for consulting and acting on the feedback that we provide from the private sector. As particularly Amir mentioned, fellow panelists, what we need to do is we need to understand and acknowledge technology. I think that is the first and foremost step, because by fearing technology, by failing to understand how technology can help us, can create taboos or can create mental blocks that say an onboarding which is remotely done is riskier than an onboarding which is done in person. And I can correlate this example myself personally. During the pandemic, I went to open an account in a bank and I presented my ID card. I mean, I was in person there. What I can say is, okay, the individual looked at the probably security features, maybe gave a quick look at myself, a glance. But I believe that in most cultures, there's a 3-second rule. So nobody was checking my facial features against the photo. Nobody was checking my chin or my earlobes or my nose if they match the photo on the ID card. So, and then the account was opened. Then under a false sense of security, it could have happened that I was a bad actor presenting a nicely fabricated even European ID card for 350 euros on the darknet. So it's not something that I'm, how to say, these are facts which are available online. So you just pay 350 euros and get a European ID card. And then obviously I could have created an individual which does not exist, but I could have created a key to the financial services industry. So as Amir said as well, it is unfair that nowadays we deem digital onboarding using technology, obviously, as riskier than face-to-face onboarding. On the contrary, I believe that digital technology with the right technology is less riskier than physical onboarding. Why? First and foremost, let's start with eID. So the European Commission was working on the eID concept. I know for certain that Germany has introduced RFID on all their national ID cards. So actually now the ID cards are being enabled with RFID technology in the chip itself. In Malta, it's the same, for example, for residence permit individuals, the chip in the ID card is also RFID enabled. And in that chip, in that small chip on the ID card, there contains a plethora of data, which is heavily encrypted, heavily secure, and contains a digital certificate. In addition to that, technology evolved, and technology evolved in a way whereby a selfie can now be interpreted, can now be face mapped. When I say face map, we're not just speaking of the popular distance between two eyes, but as I was mentioning, it's a whole map of the face. And that selfie can then be compared to the photo on the ID card or on the digital certificate captured through the RFID. So what we're saying here, we have the technology at hand, the technology available, but unfortunately, we still deem that when a person registers remotely, we still deem that it's a higher risk. So I think that is something that if we understand the controls which are inbuilt and which are available, it's a much safer way how to onboard individuals. And apart from that, what I would like to focus is on the benefit more than anything. So what we're looking here is that people that are marginated individuals, maybe people that are vulnerable and would rather not go out and travel to a bank, wait in the queue with a lot of people and risk exposure to whatever, to an illness, or even actually a better use of time. And actually being serviced 24 hours through a system and being able to be onboarded, to be able to be serviced using eID and RFID technology together with a biometric face recognition. That is my kind of observation in terms of how where we are today in terms of onboarding. And obviously such a change would reflect in a better managing an individual that has been onboarded under this technology. Thank you.
Thank you, Noel. Indeed, very interesting and concrete examples of from life how it's how digital identity can be it's proven how it can be much more secure, and trusting the technological advancements and the innovation helps to make the decisions in a much faster way and actually to continue in a continuous way, not also relying only just on the humans. Capability of recognizing the faces. Maybe I will turn back to Raluca, and if you, I don't know if you have any views when it comes to indeed what the private sector representative is saying when it comes to digital onboarding and electronic identity from the Commission's view.
Yes, thank you, Loreta, and I would like to thank the interlocutors for raising this topic. It's the case here as well that you know, when we tabled these proposals, we could not turn a blind eye on how the world is evolving, and it so happened that you know, I mean, just to put things into context, that the very fact that we started the you know, we tabled the action plan in 2020 during the pandemic, and we prepared the entire legislative package during the pandemic. So we have seen, apart from considerations of other union policies that I will refer to, we have seen that the world against us, around us, changed, and we for certain our ambition was to take into account this and to acknowledge the fact that at least when it comes to onboarding, it is more and more the case, again, forced by a context as well, that this could be done remotely. And this is why when it comes to the package that we have tabled, the approach was to ensure that the amendments to the customer due diligence provisions are in such a way drafted that so that to better frame, if I may, cases where remote customer onboarding is carried out. And this, you know, was not done in a void, but it was done in coherence with the Commission proposed amendments to the eIDAS regulation and to broader principles defined into the European digital finance strategy. So you would find in the regulation provisions on this. I mean, interlocutors refer to simplified due diligence. In this respect, we have also included in the package the possibility to for AMLA to take account of new technological developments and the progress in the field of digitalization, so that you know, to secure remote or electronic identification and the verification of prospective new customers. So it is provided in the regulation that AMLA will have the task of drawing up draft regulatory standards on customer due diligence, and these standards will also take into account new technological developments, while taking into account that the legislation, it cannot be otherwise, should be technological neutral. So we are not in the position to say we favor this technology over the other, but we were in the position, I hope this was the ambition, to allow, you know, based on future technical standards, to allow onboarding in a remote way, just to reply to the very concrete questions that were asked. And then because reference was made to the danger, if I may, of being too prescriptive, I would be happy to hear more. When do you think that this is the case in the draft proposals that the Commission tabled? I mean, not necessarily in this conference, but we can further discuss on that. What we wanted to ensure is that we already provide, you know, the framework in level 1 legislation that is defined, you know, there, and not to run into a risk that we leave while considering, you know, having due consideration on the risk-based approach. we leave it too much at the discretion of the obliged entities. So I would stop here, and again, thank you to all panelists for the nice words that I will certainly pass on to my team, because it was a team work, and for any future details or for any concrete examples where you think that we were too prescriptive, we are happy to further continue this dialogue.
Thank you, Raluca. Thanks for also good examples that you gave when it comes to the European project on electronic identity. So also maybe I will ask Ilse if you have any some kind of also reflections when it comes to those discussions on eID and faking the identity cards. I don't know if you have any interesting examples to share or any views on this.
Yeah, thank you. I think I can certainly agree to what Amir was saying about, and he was kind of like saying that it's controversial. From my perspective, it's not so controversial. From FIU Latvia perspective, we were always in a position not to refrain from the fact that we live in the 21st century and we must adapt to the environment that is around us. And COVID basically it illustrates so well that it will be just it's not even the future. It's something that we should accept. And from FIU Latvia perspective, I'm also very, although it's not Raluca's team that supported us, but European Commission as such supported us by funding one of our projects that is at some point very much also in relation to the use of technologies in work of FIUs, meaning we are creating right now here in Latvia, but we want to expand to the Baltic region and then to Nordic if possible. The public-to-public cooperation platform, which we call AML Innovation Hub. An Innovation Hub itself, the name shows already that what kind of intentions we have there. And one of the very clear pillars here in this AML Innovation Hub would be the use of technologies, artificial intelligence. We want to bring together, to put together very many dots which are there in anti-financial crime world. We really want to connect very different database that is around the world, and we want to make financial intelligence as intelligent as possible. And this certainly requires us to really be adapted to the fact that private sector is seeking the most comprehensive and sophisticated ways how to make their business. And not only how to make the business, I think Amir's point on risk assessment is very to the point. It is indeed very important that we are able really to understand what kind of risks we are facing. And by the use of technologies, I think we can try at least to reduce them. Because what is certainly true that the efforts that we were making in relation to the fighting money laundering and financial crime as such just cost us a lot of money, unacceptably much more than we expected that it will cost, but the end result is not what we expected. And therefore we need to really to try new experiences, new proposals, new means and channels how to be better in fighting financial crime.
Thank you, Ilse. Yeah, that's very interesting. Also, example indeed that you shared about this AML Innovation Hub. It's something that probably 10 years ago nobody would put those three words together. So it's really, let's say, the positive note to see how things are progressing towards the positive direction. Maybe also when Raluca was saying that and asking the industry participants to give us some more examples of where we see maybe it's too many, the legislation could be potentially seen as a bit too prescriptive. If there's any few examples where our industry participants would like to share on this, Maybe I will turn to Tyler if you have any points from your side.
Sure. I mean, I think one area, and again, I think it's well received, by the way, the discussion on digital ID, and I think, you know, technology. There's a lot of potential. I would not disagree with Amir's point on that. I think one area, I think it's Article 18.1, where when we're talking about ECDD or CDD, certain elements that are required as part of that process, including pieces of information like employment status or even refugee status. I think it's worth noting that those, you know, my question would be, you know, as opposed to identifying information that includes, you know, ID number, date of birth, obviously address and things like that. Those additional pieces of information sometimes help put the picture together, but across the board, I'm not sure they always do. And I think they can be, you know, controversial and at times, you know, serve as a disincentive for people to seek access to financial services. I think that, you know, in terms of making those types of elements prescriptive as opposed to available in a risk-based approach or available or something that you would seek in connection with cooperation with an FIU, I think those may be areas where I think we're potentially going too far, and I think run the risk, you know, both of forcing people out of the formal financial services sector, you know, because it's difficult to provide those elements, or because, you know, it creates concern on the part of the consumer. Again, I'm not saying you get, you know, in my view, you know, an appropriate risk-based approach based on typologies and an understanding of the product you're providing and the use cases that sit behind that product are critical. You know, because we all as financial institutions need to understand what's happening, why it's happening, and identify it if we can't explain it to FIUs. But in some cases, it's not clear to me that those types of elements are necessarily something that you would want to always require as a matter of CDD. So that would be one. Those would be one example I would raise.
Thank you, Tyler. Thanks. Very concrete example of the proposal. Maybe also, I know if Amir, do you have also from your side any interesting also examples to share when it comes to this?
Yeah, I mean, I think the one thing I would highlight is that in the world that we're currently living in, there are a lot of cross-border transactions and people move around a lot, which doesn't necessarily mean that they will have address verification documents for where they are based, because they are either running small businesses or moving in different jurisdictions. So, but however, having said that, we need to verify where those individuals are located, where their businesses are located, and where they are registered. And so beneficial owner registries, that is one of the things that is highlighted in the regulation, is really, really important. But I think the challenge is that in a number of countries, the information in the beneficial ownership registries is not entirely reliable. So financial institutions are then required to ensure that the information they collect is verified and then provide that information to the beneficial ownership registries, which kind of creates a catch-22, because if you're trying to connect to the beneficial ownership registry and confirm a beneficial owner structure and or the identity of the individuals, but you're verifying the information through a third-party source and then providing it to the beneficial ownership registry, you're essentially stuck in a loop. So my one humbly request would be that before we go about creating requirements for financial institutions to check those kinds of things and rely on them, it would be best if those structures were in place first. So what I mean by that is, if the beneficial ownership registries had been created and the information verified in them, and then it was a requirement for the financial institution to check those beneficial ownership registries, what that would do is that would decrease user friction, because what will happen now is, as an example, if a user comes and opens an account and I check a beneficial ownership registry and there is a gap in the ownership information, then the user experience gets impacted through no fault of the user, because they may have provided the information and the information may not have been updated in the registry, or they may not know what their requirements are. But under certain regulations, I'm not allowed to do business with that individual because their information is not updated in the registry. And so I think this is a general comment using a specific example. The general comment is, I think what the regulations need to do is make sure that the structures are in place before requiring financial institutions to absolutely have to take certain actions against those structures. And the other thing that I wanted to highlight, and I know you didn't ask this, Loreta, but I'll just take my 2 minutes and just add on to what Ilza was talking about with FIU partnerships and cooperation. I think Raluca mentioned that earlier as well. One of the things that we think will be very helpful is private to private partnerships. So information sharing between private institutions in conjunction with sharing information with the FIUs. Because what we have seen is you have individuals who may be in country A, get exited by a certain financial institutions, may go across the road to open an account at another financial institution, or go across the border and open an account, which means that these are bad actors essentially transmitting their virus from one bank to another. And so if there is public to private and private to private partnership sharing, information sharing, then those individuals will not be able to do that. And that will mitigate a lot of the risk that Ilza sees as an FIU. So those are the things I wanted to highlight. Thank you.
Thank you, Amir. Very, very good and concrete examples. And indeed, you're right. We're talking a lot now today about the public-to-public partnerships and actually public-to-private too, but there is also private-to-private, and it's something that has to be also taken into consideration, and something that's working on very small scales in certain countries, but it's definitely not sufficient to have that on a much broader scale on the EU level. So very, very good examples. Thank you. Noel, maybe you have also some interesting thoughts to share when it comes to the concrete examples of maybe of prescriptive approach of the email framework.
Yeah, thank you. In fact, one concern that I have is the proof of address and the fact that a mobile phone bill is not actually acknowledged as a proper document to prove the address of the individual. And I think historically the idea was correct, because people when I say in the past, we're speaking some 3 years ago or 4 years ago, used to be accustomed to have a landline, used to be accustomed to maybe have an internet bill service to their own home. But nowadays, again, things are changing. You have people which are mobile, which may be involved in short-letting from one point to the other in different jurisdictions. Maybe the short-let is actually being paid by the company that they are working for, so there's not even a contract in their name. So, but one major point would be, or allegedly one major point would be the data or the mobile connection. The individual would actually have reached arrangements with a telephonic company to send the bill, which actually would be electronic, just to be very fair. But normally they would an individual would make an arrangement in the country where he's living to have a phone bill to be mailed to the residential address where he's living. But unfortunately, the regulations do not consider a mobile phone bill as proof of residence, because the service has to be linked to the property where he is living, and the mobile phone bill is not deemed as such. So I think, again, because obviously of the evolution that we're passing through, and because nowadays landlines are slowly being demised or no longer sought after, rather than no longer being used, and also because even internet nowadays is on the mobile rather than actually hardwired to the premises where you're living. This gap is creating an issue. I would dare also to look at other technology, such as GPS geolocation, which the mobile indicates specifically where you are at any given moment in time. Is there proof that the individual that is living in the geolocation is actually the owner or actually residing there? But technically, we seek proof of address because we want to ensure that that individual can be contacted in that address. And that's the reason behind it. So if we are able to provide proof of that particular geolocation, or I would even dare say going even a step further and speaking about triangularization of the mobile phone signal, which is more accurate than GPS geolocation itself. We're speaking of technology that it's out there, it's available. However, unfortunately, right now it's not acknowledged as an equivalent mitigant to the paper-based approach that we have been accustomed to in the past years. So I think it would be good if, in order to facilitate the life of everyone, it would be good if these new technology options are taken into consideration to actually prove residential address of an individual. Thank you.
Thank you, Noel. Thank you. Yeah, very awesome. Very good concrete examples we share today. We see that we definitely have the experts talking at the panel today. Maybe I also will turn back to Raluca and to see if you have any comments to make when it comes to the industry participants. Two concrete examples of the experience of big companies.
Yes, thank you, Loreta, and thank you to the interlocutors. I mean, I was more into a listening mode. I'm just trying to react, for instance, requirements under CDD. In discussions with other stakeholders and in the public consultation that we have done preceding the very tabling of this proposal, we were requested, to make CDD as detailed as possible, and there were even voices that said, we would like to go through the list of things that we need to do, so that at the end of the day, as an obliged entity, if I go through the list, I'm confident that I've done a very sound CDD. And we try to explain to those interlocutors that risk is still underpinning this business. So we will not challenge the principle of which stems from a principle in the FATF that, we turn from a risk-based approach to a rule-based approach. CDD, it's steps A to M, and if you do that, you don't have to worry. And this is where, the difficulty lies. Now, I would not enter, I've heard what Noel said on 18.1, just to reply to Tyler. I think that, in cases, the risk has to be assessed by the obliged entity. And whenever there is a lower risk, we have provided for simplified due diligence. And I think, I'm speaking from recollection, I haven't checked, but I think that Article 18.1 starts by even saying that where simplified due diligence is not possible, then a natural person should provide this. The obliged entity should check a number of elements. Then to Noel, I take the point on the residents, and I take what I say not as an opinion of the Commission, but as thinking out loud. We are in a panel here. Me as a natural person, I would rather give to a bank a proof of residence instead of allowing the bank to geolocalize me. Let alone that it's difficult for a private entity, unless there is a suspicion of a crime being committed, to geolocalize with the current framework going outside, my payroll on AML. But I think that it's fair to say that this is not possible. It should not be possible today that a certain natural person is geolocalized. And I do not know, unless, again, we speak of a criminal and of very clear indication that crime has been committed, and I need to link, the presence of a person to a certain place. But I might be wrong, and I'm happy to be contradicted. Then we have to also take into account that we have a very sound framework of personal data and protection of personal data in the Union. And also from this angle, again, me as a natural person, I would rather provide proof of my residence instead of knowing that a private entity, a private operator on the market would have unnecessary access of where I am at a given moment, let alone that where I am, what my mobile is by triangulation at the given moment might give no indication. I mean, if I put myself in the shoes of a criminal, I think that I might find, you know, ways of disconnecting where my phone number is from my physical presence at a given moment. But perhaps I got wrong what Noel said. When it comes to public, private and private partnerships, we have provided language in the regulation on the reliance on third parties. Here again, because you know what we have tabled is not a revolution, it is an evolution. And we have to start from standards that are globally accepted, the FATF standards. And fact is that for third-party reliance, the FATF requires, I mean, defines, it says this is possible. It's also possible into our legislation, but under certain conditions. And the main condition, the main feature there is that the third party on which I'm relying is also supervised. So as we speak, we know that in certain member states, the Netherlands, just to give an example, Sweden is another member state that is exploring this. There are initiatives of obliged entities pooling together resources with a view to be more effective and relying, you know, their third parties one to another when it comes to the relation with the customer. And they are trying to make it more efficient within the rules to share, you know, to pool resources together. And this is allowed by the legislation. I will not enter now in the interest of time in details, but we have they're very clear. There is we think very clear language on reliance on third parties. Then when it comes to PPPs, this time public-private partnerships, here, you know, we don't have, we were not of the view that we need to be overly prescriptive here. So it will not be the place in level one legislation to provide for that. But you may be aware that we launched a public consultation, and the intention is to have a communication guidance on PPPs. And here again, this is no surprise because it was announced in the action plan last year that such guidance would follow. Yeah, I would stop here. But again, and I'm referring specifically to Noel. If I got not very accurately what you said, we are certainly open, my team and I, to hear more from you and to clarify things if need be in the course of the negotiation of the package. But as a natural person, again, I would stop by saying I don't want to be geolocalized unless I'm a proven, I mean not proven, but there is a sufficient indication, proof, evidence that I might be a criminal.
Thank you, Raluca. Yeah, that's very, very good answers. And indeed, when it comes to the public-private partnership, indeed, the requirements of outsourcing clearly stated in the regulation, and those Nordic examples are quite well known, and something probably it's a good example to spread across the EU. I'm just conscious of the time. I still had a number of questions to ask, and I see that we have only a few minutes left. So what I would like to also conclude this discussion, that I found it very interesting, a bit controversial, and it's good because that speaking openly allows also to progress and to move on certain, sometimes difficult issues. And as I said in the beginning, AML and CFT, it's probably, those are one of the most difficult files that you can find on the European level. So on the different European legislation. So really, I really wanted to thank all the participants for your contributions, for your concrete examples, for making this panel interactive, interesting, and I hope it was interesting for the people who are listening, as well as it was so interesting for me.